Speed Late Night. Your reporting continues now here on Newsroom Africa, Channel 405. Amnesty International is among those calling for the independence of journalists to be respected without attempts to harass, intimidate, or threaten media practitioners. The organization has recently noted that South African journalists constantly find themselves under attack and maligned by politicians. On this World Press Freedom Day, I'm joined by Amnesty International South Africa's Media and Communications Officer, Genevieve Quantel. Genevieve, good evening, and thank you very much for your time. One would say these are difficult times to be in the job that we're in because of just how divided or divisive politics are in this country in general. It's a really polarized environment, one would say. How difficult really is it for journalists to do their work?
Well, Thabo, there's a lot of factors that are at play here. Obviously, with a pandemic, a lot of things happening digitally, but also, and even before the pandemic, we've seen how, and whilst that a lot of the attacks are actually moving to social media, journalists are being harassed on social media. There's targeted harassment on social media, all based on statements made by people about whether the reports they have written or broadcast is wrong or fake or disinformation or misinformation. And so it's really that's the biggest problem at this stage for South African journalists. Look, there are journalists as well. We saw it recently as well, who find themselves out in the field and also facing harassment sometimes during protests, etc. So there are attacks from a number of areas.
Yeah. Is this broad attacks on the journalism profession, or are there individual journalists being targeted?
I think it's both. We see a lot of individual journalists being targeted. We've seen it for a number of years, especially female journalists on social media. And then you're also seeing sort of media houses, publications, broadcasters being targeted as well. Yeah.
And now one would say, well, Genevieve, in South Africa, we have freedom of press. I mean, you're free to say whatever you want. Right now, there's nobody who's gagging you. I'm free to say whatever. So there's no real intimidation and harassment because people are fairly free to say what they want to say.
Absolutely. Look, looking at South Africa, South African media is definitely free, and compared to other counterparts on the continent and around the world. But it doesn't mean that because you have a free media or because you have a right to say as you want, and for anyone, you have freedom of expression, but it still doesn't mean that you have the right to target and harass people.
Yeah, indeed, because what does that in fact actually result in? What would be the impact, right? Because there are many people who, I suppose, endure this type of harassment, particularly on the social platforms. I suppose you have an option of just muting and not reading and ignoring. But however, I'm sure it does take its toll at some point.
Absolutely, on individuals, and I think it even takes its toll on people's perception of the media. We're seeing, and we see it in our statement, we're seeing the trust in the media waning more and more because of disinformation and misinformation, whether it comes from the media side or whether it comes with those targeting them on social media. And those are the kind of things that need to be combated. People need to realize that you can judge your freedom based on the freedom of your press because you need to know what's happening in the country that you live in.
Yeah. Well, we had interesting testimony from the president this past week on how he now said, well, the media actually played a rather important role, a patriotic role, in fact, in investigating state capture. It's not necessarily something that we have been hearing coming out of politicians, at least in the last couple of years. More than anything else, we've been hearing that there is a third force that is at play whenever media reports on these issues.
Absolutely. Like you said, the president this week, but when the media first started reporting on state capture, etc., there were a lot of accusations. I saw reports earlier this week that that media houses, journalists were accused of being racist, were accused of having an agenda, of wanting to bring people down. And now that everything's coming out in the state capture inquiry, now they say, well done, patriotic. And that's why we need to have the backing, the media needs to have the backing of governments, politicians who need to be responsible with the way they talk about the media.
Yeah. However, I mean, we also have to admit that at some point, as the media, we also get it wrong, right? And when we do get it wrong, we get it monumentally wrong. And how has that played into, I suppose, the issues that you're raising around the integrity of the media always now coming under question whenever a report is being published?
That obviously hasn't helped at all. And I think a big issue around that is, as we see, media houses have not been exempt from the economic devastation. We're seeing smaller newsrooms. It's making it harder for people to do their jobs, the changing nature of news. And I think, we have recourse in South Africa, obviously. If someone has written something false about you, or there's a false news report, we have the press ombudsman. And we should rather be using the press ombudsman than harassing and targeting journalists for fake news. And I'm not saying we shouldn't call people out. We should. But it should also be taken to the ombudsman so that there's a fair hearing and we can say, yes, definitely that was wrong. An apology is made. Because I think the media also needs to build on that trust that is waning.
Yeah, indeed. Structures of support for journalists, I mean, are they adequate? Do we have a place where journalists can go out and at least get representation or get their voices heard in an instance of being intimidated and being harassed?
I'm not sure at this stage. I know, look, you've got SANEF, the International Editors Forum, which always stands up and says something when journalists are being targeted or harassed. But it's also up to every citizen and every person in the country to, when people are being harassed, journalists, stand up and say, no, this isn't on. Because like I said earlier, you can judge your freedom as a person based on media freedom.
Yeah, indeed. And it would be a sad day, I suppose, when you as a citizen can no longer have free media. And I'm sure we've got plenty of examples and instances elsewhere in the world where that happens. Yeah, indeed. All right, Genevieve, that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. That's Amnesty International South Africa's Media and Communications Officer, Genevieve Quantel.